He laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a polite one, but the kind of smirk-laced, stage-commanding chuckle that only works when the cameras are rolling and the crowd is primed. Governor Gavin Newsom leaned back in his chair under the late-night lights, relaxed like a man too used to applause. He tilted his head, waved his hand dismissively, and tossed out the line like a perfectly rehearsed jab. "Karoline Leavitt," he said mockingly. "Please, if I wanted advice from a partisan mouthpiece, I'd check Twitter." Laughter erupted. On cue. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. The host, clearly enjoying the moment, gave an exaggerated nod and tried to volley the energy back to the audience. They responded as expected. Chuckles, claps, approval. It was the kind of media moment designed for viral sound bites. Casual cruelty dressed up as political confidence. But something subtle shifted. Not everyone was laughing. The camera caught it. Just for a second. A flicker in the crowd. A look that wasn't quite amusement. The kind of moment that might have faded unnoticed, if not for what happened next. By morning, the clip had exploded online, but not in the way Newsom's team might have hoped. The usual left-right outrage cycle didn't kick in right away. Instead, there was a ripple, a quiet but focused murmur that grew by the hour. But it wasn't outrage fueling them, it was resolve. Veterans posted videos, single moms shared clips from their kitchens, small business owners, many from Newsom's home state, dug up footage, posted receipts, and began connecting dots. The mockery had touched a nerve, not because it was cruel, but because it was familiar, because they'd all seen that smirk before, heard it, been dismissed by it. Then, just before sunrise, Karoline Leavitt, quiet until now, broke her silence. One sentence, no hashtags, no emojis, no theatrics. Careful, Governor. Mockery fades when the truth shows up. The internet didn't explode. It held its breath. By noon, major networks confirmed it. A national debate scheduled within the week. Karoline versus Gavin, live, unfiltered. The headline flashed across every major screen. America's future, face to face. CNN confirmed the details. The debate would take place in Midtown Manhattan, moderated by Jake Tapper. Newsom's camp moved quickly, spinning the appearance as a gesture of goodwill, a chance to model how to handle extremism with facts and grace. Within hours, op-eds followed. Media headlines painted him as the level-headed statesman taking the high road, a progressive leader offering dialogue instead of division. But Karoline? She didn't release a statement. No press tour, no rebuttal. Nothing. Not publicly anyway. Behind the scenes, something very different was happening. People close to her saw the shift. Case files, testimonies, policy memos, and budget breakdowns. Veterans Affairs reports firsthand. Statements from displaced citizens, whistleblowers, and frontline workers. It wasn't flash, it was fact. Quiet, methodical, and unrelenting. She wasn't preparing for a debate, she was preparing for a trial. When debate night finally arrived, the set gleamed in red, white, and blue. The camera swept across the packed auditorium, tension vibrating under the surface like static before a storm. Tapper welcomed the audience with all the gravity of a national moment. The air felt less like a political event and more like history waiting to happen. Gavin Newsom came out first, all polish and poise. Hair perfect, suit sharp, smile dialed to that careful mix of charm and command. He waved to the crowd, posed for cameras, and sat with the ease of someone expecting to win the night before it even began. Then Karoline walked out. No wave, no grandstanding, just a crimson blazer, a calm expression, and a single folded page in her hand. She stood still, eyes forward. There was nothing unreadable about her face, except the absolute stillness of it, and maybe the steel just behind her eyes. Tapper wasted no time. Governor Newsom, you recently made remarks mocking your opponent during a televised appearance. Would you like to clarify or retract those words? Gavin turned toward the crowd, grinning. I stand by my words, he said. We're here to expose extremism with facts. Applause. Polite, orchestrated applause. Karoline didn't blink. She turned to face him, voice calm. Governor, you mock from stages. I bring records. Tonight, America will see which one matters. There was no applause, no cue for cheering, Just silence. Leaning forward, Tapper glanced at his notes, already sensing what everyone else was beginning to feel. This wasn't going to go as expected. Gavin adjusted his cufflinks. Karoline didn't adjust a thing, and then it began. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't wave papers or slam the podium. She simply unfolded the page in her hand and held it up for the camera. "Governor Newsom," she said, "on May 14th, you told reporters you had no knowledge of the Westbrook eviction directive. Is that correct?" Newsom nodded, leaning back again. "Correct. I've denied involvement in selective enforcement, not the directive itself." Karoline paused, then placed the paper flat on her podium. "This is your signature," she said, "dated May 10th. That's 4 days before the press conference. It's a direct approval of the enforcement guidelines. I also have time-stamped emails, internal memos, and an affidavit from your city administrator who specifically warned you about its impact on low-income veterans." Gasps echoed in the crowd. Newsom shifted, not dramatically, just a momentary blink, a slight twitch in the corner of his mouth, but the cameras caught it, so did the millions watching. Tapper turned, now fully engaged. "Governor, how do you respond to that documentation?" Newsom reached for his water. Let's not mistake bureaucratic processes for intentional harm. Leaders sign hundreds of documents weekly. This feels like an attempt to weaponize context. Karoline didn't move. Her voice didn't waver. "I have 47 more pages, numbered, sourced, sworn under penalty of perjury, all from your own staff. Would you like to go through them, or should we skip to the veterans who lost their homes?" Silence. Not stunned, focused. That particular kind of quiet that means the tide just shifted. The cameras didn't pan. They held still. The audience didn't fidget. They leaned forward. No applause, no laughter, no interruptions. Just the quiet weight of a moment too real to ignore. Newsom sat frozen, not in fear, but in calculation. He was still a seasoned politician, still thinking 2 moves ahead, but this wasn't the usual game. The script was broken, and across from him stood someone not playing by the old rules. Karoline didn't smile, didn't gloat. She flipped the next page. Clean, quiet, professional. "Page 2, she said. "Internal memo from your Deputy Director of Housing. Quote, Governor has been briefed on the 2023 impact report and gave verbal go-ahead despite our recommendations against it. That was 3 days before your press conference where you denied any foreknowledge. Would you like me to keep reading?" Newsom raised his eyebrows slightly as if attempting a smirk. It didn't land. "I think we're veering off into selective reading," he replied. "One memo doesn't define a policy." Karoline glanced at Tapper. "Jake, may I?" Tapper, caught somewhere between moderator and stunned spectator, gave a cautious nod. Karoline turned to the camera, folding her hands over the podium. "I'm not here to debate ideology. I'm here because truth matters. And when truth is mocked, when facts are dismissed as theatrics, people get hurt. Real people. Families lose homes. Veterans get pushed out of housing they were promised. Small businesses shut down while ribbon cuttings happen 2 blocks away. That's not policy failure. That's planned neglect." She paused, then laid out 3 documents side by side. These are 3 internal directives signed by the governor's office within a 7-day period. Each one approved funding cuts to veteran housing programs while simultaneously green-lighting redevelopment grants to private contractors. 2 of those contractors were listed as donors in your last campaign report. The silence turned heavier. Tapper leaned in. "Governor, do you deny approving those grants?" Newsom cleared his throat. "I support redevelopment. I support smart investment. These claims conflate timelines and ignore broader context. We're talking about isolated decisions over months, not a coordinated, Karoline cut in, calm. "So you're saying it's coincidence?" Newsom hesitated. Karoline tapped a single page. "Because I have a calendar of meetings where both the cuts and the donations were discussed in the same 72-hour window. Coordinated or not, the result was the same." He didn't respond. Not immediately, and in that pause, something shifted. Not in the words, but in the perception. The audience no longer saw a confident governor defending his record. They saw a man in retreat, dodging data, reaching for old lines that no longer stuck. By now, social media was on fire. Not with clips or sound bites, but with screenshots of the documents Karoline held up. Analysts and journalists were pulling case numbers in real time, confirming footnotes, cross-referencing statements. This wasn't politics anymore. It was exposure. Tapper tried to redirect. "Let's shift briefly to national issues. Education, the economy. Ms. Leavitt, do you have policy plans that—" "I do," she said. "But we can't fix a broken engine until we stop pretending the smoke is just weather." Tapper blinked. "Could you clarify?" Karoline leaned slightly forward. America is tired of polished misdirection. We have leaders who speak in circles while families lose faith in the system. I'm not here to charm you. I'm not here to outdebate Gavin Newsom. I'm here to do what leaders used to do, show up with the facts and own the consequences. That sentence hit like a cold wind. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it echoed through the studio, through the live stream, through the living rooms of Americans who had forgotten what accountability sounded like. Newsom tried to pivot. The truth is more complex than sound bites and PDFs. Governing is hard, it requires compromise, and leadership is about seeing the bigger picture, not cherry-picking statistics for applause. But there was no applause, because no one was clapping. Karoline raised her hand, not high, just enough to hold up a fourth document. This is not cherry picking. This is a foreclosure letter sent to a veteran named Daniel Reyes. He served 2 tours, came home, applied for a housing voucher under your administration's post-service reintegration plan, got approved, then lost it when the Westbrook directive went into effect. She looked directly at Gavin. Do you remember him? Gavin didn't answer. He died by suicide 3 weeks later. The room froze. Karoline lowered the page carefully. No one blames you for every tragedy, Governor, but when you mock people who bring you truth, when you turn real consequences into punchlines, you stop being a public servant and you start being a brand. Tapper didn't speak, neither did Newsom. Even the studio crew seemed still, as though moving might rupture something fragile and irreplaceable. For 30 seconds, the debate stopped being a debate. It was something else. Not anger, not shame, truth. Then, finally, Tapper spoke, quietly. We'll take a brief break, but no one moved. No one dared. Across the country, people sat in stunned silence, not because they agreed with everything Karoline said, but because they knew they just witnessed something they hadn't seen in years. A politician refusing to play the game. When the cameras returned, the mood had shifted completely. Gone were the pre-written jabs, the careful sound bites. What remained was raw presence, unrehearsed, unfiltered, unavoidable. Jake Tapper looked visibly different when the broadcast resumed. More serious, less moderator, and more witness. He welcomed viewers back with a voice tempered by the gravity of what had just unfolded. There was no joking tone, no attempt to smooth the tension, just one simple sentence. We return now to a conversation that has taken on a life of its own. Gavin Newsom was first to speak. His voice, though steady, carried a new edge. Less arrogance, more calculation. I want to be clear, he began. I have tremendous respect for veterans, for all Americans who serve. I also believe in the complexity of governance. We can't run a state or a country by chasing isolated anecdotes. Karoline didn't flinch. I agree, she said. We can't build policy on anecdotes. That's why I'm not here with one story. I'm here with hundreds. She tapped the stack of folders in front of her. Clean, numbered, color-coded. These are case files from people directly impacted by decisions your office made. People who lost homes, care, access to medication, while your administration funneled state funds into vanity projects and PR initiatives. These aren't stories. They're sworn statements, public records, audit trails. Gavin opened his mouth to interject, but Karoline continued. I'm not a professional politician. I don't have a media team spinning headlines. What I have are receipts. And whether or not this country wants to listen, they're watching now. Somewhere in the audience, someone coughed. It was the only sound. Tapper slowly leaned toward the governor. Would you like to respond to the specific allegations about donor influence, Governor? The ones tied to the redevelopment grants? Newsom stiffened, just slightly. His voice remained smooth, but it lacked the easy charm from earlier. There's a fundamental misunderstanding here, he said. Donations are legal. Our processes are transparent. We've been cleared of any wrongdoing by oversight committees, which you appointed, Karoline interjected. Every one of them. And I've got the appointment letters to prove it. Tapper blinked. You have those with you? Karoline nodded. Signed and dated, included in the appendix I submitted prior to the broadcast. Newsom shifted. The confidence was still there, but it was no longer casual. It was defensive. What followed wasn't a shouting match. It wasn't even dramatic. It was methodical. Karoline walked through one case after another. Names, dates, memos, correspondence. For every talking point, Newsom offered she had 3 concrete rebuttals. Not opinions, not spin, just well-researched, verifiable facts. And slowly, something remarkable began to happen. The audience stopped treating the event like a performance. They began taking notes. Phones came out, not to tweet memes, but to record, to screenshot, to verify. Reporters in the back rows stopped prepping pre-written takes. They started cross-referencing documents on the fly. Editors texted producers. Producers called fact-checkers. Somewhere in Washington, aides woke their bosses up. By the end of the second hour, the narrative had unraveled. Newsom wasn't losing a debate. He was losing control of a narrative he'd curated for years. The man once hailed as the silver-tongued statesman of the left now looked like a cornered CEO at a congressional hearing. Tapper called for another short break. Backstage, Newsom's team scrambled. There were whispers of pulling out, whispered updates from social media teams. Meanwhile, Karoline sat quietly in her chair. No phones, no talking, just reviewing the next batch of documents, calmly flipping pages, highlighting only what she needed. No grandstanding, no press behind her, just prep. As the broadcast resumed, a graphic appeared on screen. Public Trust Index, real-time viewer feedback. It wasn't supposed to be live until the end, but producers couldn't wait. The results were already too compelling. The numbers didn't lie. Karoline's trust rating had jumped 42 points. Newsom's had dropped 28. Jake Tapper addressed the elephant in the room. Governor Newsom, the public response to this debate has been overwhelming. What do you say to Americans who feel that your administration has misled them, especially those directly impacted by the decisions Ms. Leavitt is citing tonight? Newsom stared at the camera for a moment too long. "I say this," he began. "Don't confuse conviction with accuracy. Don't mistake paperwork for proof. Governance is bigger than isolated mistakes, and political opponents thrive on oversimplification." Karoline didn't respond right away. She let his words linger in the air. Then she turned to face him fully. "Governor, no one expects perfection, but they do expect honesty. They expect leadership that doesn't mock or minimize the damage done under its watch." You talk about complexity. I live in it every day, so do millions of Americans who don't get the luxury of blaming context when the bills show up. Newsom sighed audibly. "You're turning this into theater." Karoline shook her head. "No, I'm ending the show." The crowd didn't cheer, they just stared, because everyone understood exactly what she meant. This wasn't a viral moment. It wasn't politics as usual. It wasn't two parties arguing over the middle. It was a mirror, and America was looking at itself. Some saw a leader in decline. Others saw a rising force they weren't sure how to classify. But no one saw business as usual anymore. After closing statements, Tapper thanked the audience, but no one moved. Not right away, not even after the cameras shut off. Something had shifted, not just in the room, but in the country. Newsom exited quickly, his team surrounding him, heads down, voices tight. Karoline stayed behind. She answered a few questions, shook a few hands. Then she gathered her pages, slid them into a folder, and walked off the stage without press fanfare or victory posing. One camera, still live streaming from the wings, caught her final moment before leaving the building. A journalist asked, "Do you think you won?" She stopped, turned. "This wasn't about winning," she said. "This was about revealing." And I think America saw what it needed to see. If you like this video, then subscribe.